to the Antlered Crown podcast, where we discuss brews, witchcraft, spirituality, and more.
We hope through conversation we can continue the trend of the collective awakening or learn something new from ourselves and each other. I need a new line there. Fuck that line, honestly. We hope through conversation we can fuck about and find out. Fuck that line. It's so repetitive.
We have to right, maybe you do your one and I'll do my one.
We'll just keep going.
No, let's do.
Today we're going to drink some
tea. We're drinking tea.
And then we're going to talk more to a very knowledgeable German folk witch.
So come on in. Welcome to the Antlered Crown podcast. I'm Elwyn, and I am a hedge witch.
And I'm Amanda, the Antlered Queen, and I am so very excited to be speaking to the amazingly wonderful German folk practitioner,
AHearthWitch.
Yay!
What began your practice into witchcraft?
Oh, I don't know that. It's kind of a funny question because it's like I don't ever feel like witchcraft has been like a conscious choice. I feel like it's always just been something that I've done. So I remember being drawn to it pretty much as early as I can remember. I have no cognizant memory of being like, I want to be like that lady, looking at like a witch trial burning or anything. I'm like, yeah, for sure. That's the path I want to lead. But like, it was just something that it was just me. It just felt like it was, oh yeah, that's what I do. That's what I like. And so from the moment that I learned what it was and was introduced to it, it was something that I felt called to and felt like it was a part of me. And so I didn't really actively start pursuing witchcraft until I was probably 15. Excuse me, not 15. In 2015. No, I was older than that. But I was, I feel like before that it was sort of like off and on dabbling. And so I grew up in the Christian church. And so of course that came with a lot of, certain religious ramifications of like, you're gonna go to hell. And like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And so it was a lot of like off and on. My first spell was like an interaction with a land spirit. It was like this spirit that I'd had. It was definitely local. Whenever I was 11, so I think I was in like the 5th grade or so.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like the first spell that I had done. And it was before I'd really, read any witchcraft books or anything like that. And so that's when I started kind of getting more actively into it and diving deep was in 2015, where I started to read witchcraft books. Tumblr was big back in that day. So I was in the era of Tumblr witchcraft. So that was fun, which was a shit show. Not as bad as Witch Talk, but was still a little interesting. And so I got into witchcraft like heavily into the astrology and like crystals and like amethyst is gonna cure cancer and all that shit.
Right.
And so it was just like, but I never subscribed to any of that. And so it was always just sort of disheartening to read things because it was like I'd always connected more to different aspects of nature and different aspects of like, I don't know, just like that spiritual connection that you can feel between a person, sort of feeling that way between places and feeling it in different of a place and in a place, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so upon, getting invested in like, witchcraft online in 2015 and seeing what other people were doing, it was like, well, this is horse shit. I hate this. And so then it was again, sort of like, kind of like this period of self-reflection, I guess, and having to dive deep. And slowly I started finding folk magic. And that's kind of when I started on like the path that I'm on today in a more recognizable form, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that was my personal trajectory into
nice. And now you're here in Witch Talk.
I'm here. Yeah. Oh man.
Welcome.
One shit show to another.
I'll ask more one.
Yeah.
Which is pertaining to Witch Talk. Funny
Yeah.
enough. What is the biggest thing you've learned from Witch Talk community, and what has your experience been like? How have you been handling trolls or negativity and things like that, etc.?
I've learned a lot of shocking things. A lot of not so pleasant things. I think if anything, the biggest lesson I feel like that continues to come up for me every time I log into my phone and I get onto Witch Talk, it's this incredible need for humans to have an identity in something, and for people to have a sense of belonging. And so I'm always seeing videos of like, oh, I'm into green witchcraft, or I'm a death witch, or all these different various labels. And not that any of those are invalid. I'm not gonna sit here and say, you're an idiot or whatever just because it's not my personal path. But I feel like every time I log into Witch Talk, and it's very similar to any time I log into any online witchcraft space, it's this impressing need for people, it seems, to want to identify with something instead of identifying with literally their own background and their own life and experiences and the nature around them. And it's like sometimes it feels like a show. And so I learned a lot of, I don't know, an interesting psychological lessons, I feel like, when I'm on Witch Talk. But the more positive things I think that I've learned, I've definitely been able to have opportunities to get to witness people's cultural and bloodline practices, and that's such a fucking treat. I love that. I'm so fascinated with the ways that other people perceive the world around them and their own individual experiences and the experiences that they've shared within a certain collective, that is so beautiful and fascinating to get to see and experience in ways that we never would if we didn't have the internet. And that's just a fucking treat every single day. And I've met a lot of amazing friends that way too. One of my close friends now is a Korean shaman. In what world would I have ever met a Korean shaman without the internet? That's amazing. And so I'm just incredibly fucking grateful for stuff like that. So that's, the more positive part of what I've learned. And Witch Talk is notorious for negativity. And some just heinous batshit logic, it's definitely not void of any of that shit. Which that's when I have to put my phone down and I just walk away, because it's like I can't even begin to mentally wrap my mind around the fact that whatever, take your pick, I guess. But and so for that, it doesn't faze me too much. It phases me in the sense where I have to like put my phone down or say to my partner, look at the shit I just saw, and just get that cathartic release and get it out of my system. But like sometimes the negativity that I try to more so focus on is like the negativity within the particular like communities that I'm in, for better or worse, right? And so being a German folk practitioner, you can imagine the type of bullshit that comes along with that, and various historical, rewrites of certain narratives that people want to push, about like, oh yeah, Germans have been doing this forever. I'm like, Germany wasn't a fucking country until like 1945. So what are you even talking about? So no, Germans have not been doing that for 2,000 years. Germanic people might have been doing that, but so that's always fun. But that's the negativity that I try to focus on, because it's more tangible for me to deal with. Because you can't pick and win every battle, right? And so I think that the forms of negativity that I try to address specifically are ones that my community has perpetuated, and ones that my community still deals with, and the ways that they affect other people. And so it's like, that's what I try to focus on.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. I think that's the internet has made a great thing for folk witchcraft in general.
Yes.
Because I was actually talking to someone about this the other day, in the way of in the 90s, if you wanted to learn anything about magic on the internet, you'd get Wicca. Primarily Wicca.
Yes.
And that was it. But it facilitated Wicca in the 90s. There was just so much of it, and you see it in Hollywood, you see it in films, and now it's coming to this point where people are looking for other things.
Yes.
And they may have even started with Wicca.
Yes.
But they're also is branching out and it's becoming
Mhm.
much more accessible
Mm-hmm.
to a point that some form of folk practices were almost but forgotten. They may have been carried on, but like for
Mhm.
instance, some of the things that I was taught, they're not even things that I thought anyone would want to know about.
Right.
Like that.
Right. No, and it's amazing how
Yeah.
starved people are in that way, in that respect. I think that again, I have my personal opinions about things, and I don't want to make broad sweeping statements to say that, everybody who's into Wicca is an idiot. So I don't want to say that. But but Wicca as a practice is so incredibly, you know what I mean? It's just crap. Just
Yeah.
crap. It's just when you get into the bare bones of it, it's appropriation from pretty much every culture that you can possibly imagine. It's a bunch of horse shit that Gerald Gardner pulled from Margaret Murray and exploited up to the nth degree. You know what I mean? So it's just like it's definitely like it's like a gateway drug, but like it leads to the harder stuff. And so I think that it's helpful in that respect, but I do think that it's so beneficial for having these online spaces for people who want to get into that, and then they don't have to just stop at Wicca and think, okay, whatever, I guess this is it. And I think that it's incredible too. This is one of the things that I just get really passionate about, because I think that if we are honest with ourselves, I think that a lot of our practices are dying if they're not dead already.
Yeah.
How many people, I mean, I have to argue with people online every single day who live in Germany are like, well, I've never heard of that. I'm like, oh, really interesting. You're the forefront of the entire German experience. You as an individual, were you nominated by the prime minister? That's amazing. You're the sole representative for German culture. I can't believe you haven't heard of this. So it's just ridiculous, the amount of people that want to argue with certain things. And it's like, yes, you haven't heard of this because it's dying. It's dead. It's leaving because of various reasons, whether people wanted to willingly give it up or if they didn't, if it was stripped or modified or whatever. And so particularly in Germany, Germany had a heinous amount of witch trials. And so there's a lot of folk practices that likely would have still existed today had certain things not been hammered out and stamped out back in the, 1500s. So it's, it's just one of those things. And then even beyond that, we have in Germany, Protestantism was formed in Germany, started with good old Martin Luther. And so that also, that's one of the main reasons that inspired so many witch trials. It's like the Catholics and the Protestants were competing on how many people they could kill. Super duper. It was like the Super Bowl, but murder. And then, like beyond that, then you had fucking Nazis, and then they were, they burned a bunch of occult texts, except they kept the ones that they liked that made Heinrich Himmler get his jollies off, apparently. So, it's just shit, right? It fucking pisses me off with the way that some of these things can have gone out in history, but that's where the internet's been very redemptive in being able to kindle a lot of this stuff. And you find so many people who are so desperate to find some sense of cultural connection, particularly in these like folk cultural practices, where it's like literally any fucking little thing.
Yeah.
They're just starved for it. Like, please tell me, what do I do with this? I'm like, well, okay, you want to know? That's great. Awesome. I'll tell you, and it's been so cool, learning about it and practicing it and being able to help people with that. Like, that's been like my biggest joy, I think, being online. Is being able to like help people find that connection and not be just contained to Wicca or contained to just, false notions of various, Germanic practices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I think it's one of the things I hate about high magic.
Yes.
In terms of ceremonial and high magic is this, it's classism.
Oh, 100%.
100%. It's racism as well, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's the aristocracy.
Yeah.
These white men were able to practice magic and not be persecuted by it.
Yeah.
And the idea is that because they were harnessing, demons and such.
Yeah. Which now that's a great spiritual relationship for sure. That's who's not going to want to do whatever you want if you got them in shackles. That's always a great way to start a relationship. That's such bullshit. There's a great zine by somebody named Ezra Rose. And they are a Jewish artist. I actually need to double check on that, but their name is Ezra Rose, and they have a zine that they did about the history of anti-Semitism in high magic, ceremonial magic, and and aspects of occultism, and it is so fucking good and illuminating. And it talks about the ways that like these Catholic priests who were held above the law, they could do whatever they wanted because they were Catholic priests, and they falsely interpreted a lot of notions that existed in Judaism. For example, the way that and I'm not Jewish, so absolutely, people go back and cross-reference me. I'm just, trying to remember adequately what Ezra Rose stated, but it was that in Judaism, there is certain approaches on how people view like the relationship between humans and demons. And it's a little bit more, it's a lot different than the relationship that we see in like Catholicism. And so it's kind of like this notion that everything has a role or a relationship or a purpose sort of thing. But high magic, I'm not like, I've said I'm not big on high magic and like summoning people and just to put them into shackles, but like, I don't know. I think I would consider it to summon Crowley and, like bind him, that'd be cool. Maybe I could, I don't know. Would it be worth it? I like to think maybe.
Bind him to something that would really piss him off.
Oh, a woman.
A woman. I was thinking more like a lavender stuffed scented pillow with lace.
Yes. Yes.
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's not for me. Definitely not.
No.
No. The idea of folk magic is also such a it's a fluidity almost.
Yes.
It is magic that is not, you do not try to like master or shackle it in some form. It is simply just you are living in accordance with it.
Right.
Right. It is closer to something that, isn't in history because it's something, that we had before. Whereas high magic is just it's just that idea of look at me master and shape something that is bigger than me.
It's like high magician wants to learn how to shackle the world, both seen and unseen. And it's like a folk magic practitioner is trying to shackle the parts of themselves that would like to lead into these indulgencies and these self-glorifications and these, disgusting patterns that we see that come out of like the more toxic side of humanity, right? And it's just like, that's not what it's about. And it's like animism, right, is one of the more pervasive, philosophical, however you want to say that, standpoints that's existed arguably since the dawn of time. And so I know when a lot of people are like, well, I want to reconnect to what my ancestors did. I'm like, well, you need to go to animism. Pretty much start there, right? You don't need to worry about fucking, oh, my family's from, I don't know, wherever the hell, or they were Norse pagan. Like, okay, you don't actually know that for sure. They may have been, they might not have been. But if you want to know pretty confidently what they did, find some semblance of animism and connect with the land and connect with the people and the spirits around you. Have some semblance of community. Think outside yourself, which I feel like is the, high magic is like the antithesis to that. It's all about not thinking about how you can care for people around you or the world around you. It's thinking about how they can care for you. And what's the joy in that? We already have that.
But it is that thing of like high magic and forms of folk magic, the idea of the wizard and then the witch, and the idea of the wizard living in a tower with all these brass constructs and
just indulgencies and upon indulgencies.
Exactly. It's this just
stupid
pompous, like this pious
whereas
the witch is the midwife,
right,
the healer, the witch is among people doing things, whereas the other one's like just leads out the window, like, people, I've had an idea. Like,
okay. Well, and it's just like, what are your ideas going to benefit me? Like, what do you have that you can offer me realistically? Like, that's not like folk magic. Like, it's funny because whenever I talk to people, it's like, a lot of the grimoires that you're going to be reading is going to be about like cows and shit, right? Because like that's what was important to people. And so it's like, but I think that we can take that frustration, put it aside, and look at the bigger point, which is that folk magic is for your everyday. It's for the average person. It's anybody can start it, anybody can approach it. You don't have to have these pompous ideas of the self and the world like that. You don't need that. You just need to have some kind of sense of humility to approach and figure out how to manage your day-to-day life.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a huge fan. I really love Cecil Williamson. He was quite humble in many ways, and he didn't really write much about his own stuff that he did. He was at one point a friend of Gerald Gardner's. And Gerald Gardner basically hit rock bottom at one point.
Yeah.
Cottage and gave him a job in the museum where he worked and kind of allowed him to sell his books. Well, anyways, I can't remember where this, I think it was in one of like Gemma Gary's books or something, but
Yeah.
he had this lamp that he acquired, Cecil Williamson, that had a spirit attached to it. And Gerald Gardner said, like, oh, let's call this spirit out. He says, well, I've worked with the spirit before. We can do that. He said, let me do this. It's like, okay, fine. So Cecil Williams said he got a knife out. He started waving it about. He said he had robes on and there was a lot of fuss. He said, and all of a sudden, this kind of red lit hooded figure appeared above the lamp, just behind it. And apparently Gardner just kind of shrieked and ran out of it. It was like, I don't understand. That's what he wanted to happen.
You did it.
I do feel like Gerald Gardner probably, like, if you had to tell like a first time witch, well, here, what do I need to know about Gerald Gardner? I feel like if you told that story, I'd be like, okay, I have a good insight to this individual's personality now. That's good to know.
And his like floppy hair, just like
yeah.
like,
I think he is like of the witchcraft community at the time. I think he was like Dwight Schrute. That's who I think he was.
That's really not that bad of an analogy, which is funny too, because like if you're listening and you have family from Pennsylvania and you're like one of those Pennsylvania Germans, Dwight Schrute's character is actually it's not far off, frankly.
Really?
Like it's really not far off. Like it's definitely like a comedic approach. It's exaggerated. But at the same time, like there's certain aspects within the show where I'm like, well, hey, like he dresses up as like Belsnickel one time. And so like in continental Germany, you'll have a character who's like Pelsnickel. And so they're sort of related. But Belsnickel is more like prominent with like the Pfalz, Rhineland. I don't think he was in Saarland, but like Southwest Germany, which is where most of the Pennsylvania Germans came from. Yeah. And he's sort of, it's, depends on who you ask and how willing they are to, acknowledge the folklore's relationship with like paganism, whatever. But he is likely the folkloric remnant of the god Wotan. And most people know him as Odin. Yeah. So fun fact. But yeah.
Interesting.
Cool. Yeah, Dwight's actually not a bad representation for German Americans. Yeah. I mean, it's not great. We could definitely have better. I mean, we definitely could have better, but not the word. Not it's accurate. It's unfortunately accurate, but yeah.
I like it. Wouldn't be a show without Dwight, though. To be fair,
no, it wouldn't. Absolutely not.
I mean, I think like the idea of Gardner though as Dwight is the same with like Dwight talks a big game, but then all of a sudden, oh no, every time he always wants the boss position.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's just a big, not soft. I guess sort of like a softie, just gonna fold. He's gonna melt under. Yeah, absolutely.
So what or who has inspired you in your craft?
Oh gosh. So I was thinking about this. I feel like there's like groups of individuals that have inspired me. And then there's like, certain authors that I've been really enjoying lately and they've been inspiring me lately. So like in general, I'm so inspired by any type of like cultural or bloodline practitioner. And I said this earlier, I just truly love getting to see that on Witch Talk and other places online. I just love getting to see people's cultural practices. I think it's so beautiful. I think it's so fascinating how in some ways we're all so different and yet similar. And so one thing I've loved is getting to see hoodoo practitioners on Witch Talk. I love the way that, some of my, I've got some mutuals on TikTok who are hoodoo practitioners. And I just love the way that they approach their craft. And I love the cultural connection that they share. I think it's so beautiful. And I think that and then, I've mentioned that I got one of my close friends now is a Korean shaman. I love whenever she gets to show bits of her practice and like we kind of go back and forth and she's like, no, I want people to like, this is open. This is such a cool part of my craft. I would love it if people started doing this. And it's just like, I really love getting to see people who are just in this like well-established tradition. I
Mhm.
think that's always so inspiring to me. And in no way inspiring in the sense of like, hey, I'm gonna steal that, but like inspiring just in the sense of like it's just so beautiful to just see. It's
Mhm.
just cool because I think that a lot of people who have European ancestry, when they investigate those sides of their family and they investigate that cultural, concept, it feels like a cultural loss because a lot of people have forgotten those parts, especially when they immigrated to America. And even beyond that, if you ask somebody who lived in Germany today, do you know what Bracha is? Do you know what Brachrai is? Like, if do you know what the old ways are? And they would like, no. What are you talking about? I'm gonna go to the discotheque. Like they don't know what they don't know what that is. And so it's just I'm always so inspired by having the blessing and opportunity to get to see people who have these practices that are preserved and they have elders. Like, God, that's such a fucking cool thing to have elders. Like,
Right.
I don't really have any that I know of in our craft. I mean, there's a couple of people who I consider like personal elders, but overall, it's not something that's like readily available where you can like, contact like a local German practitioner and see if they have an elder who would like be willing to take you on and teach you. So I consider it an immense privilege to getting to see practices that have that.
Yeah.
That's I've always found that super inspiring.
Yeah.
And then
Mm.
on like an author level,
Mhm.
lately I've just been super inspired by I'm reading what is it called? It's like 13 Brooms at Midnight. It's by Roger Horn. Really
Mhm.
enjoying that one. Roger Horn's books always.
Oh, 13 Gates. The
13
13
Gates, that's what it is.
yeah,
Yes.
Room at Midnight.
hmm
Fantastic. Great
Yeah.
book. Love that book.
Yeah, I'm reading it now and Roger Horn's books always just
He's he just puts it so he puts
He puts
things
it in a
so
sandwich.
simply.
Yes, and it's
But
so
then-
fucking difficult
yeah.
finding a witchcraft book for when people don't just they want to have this like sense of gravitas and
Yeah.
this like mystery about shit, and it's just like shut the fuck up, just tell me what you're talking about. I don't know what you're saying.
You want one of
Like,
the worst books for that? We have a book club on our
uh-huh.
Discord, and someone recommended the book. They was like, "Oh, you should read this book," and so it was called "Letters from the Devil's Forest"
Oh boy.
by
Okay.
Robin Artison. Now, there are some things in the book that are good.
Uh-huh.
I'll give it that. There are
Yeah.
some things in the book that are good. The book itself is like this thing. It's
Oh
like
my God. Yeah.
800 pages, big book.
Yeah.
We got most of the way through the book and we all looked at each other and we were like, he's repeating himself, but it's also,
No.
you're getting this sense of, I have the secrets to something.
I hate that shit.
I'm not going to tell you.
I hate that. That's so obnoxious.
He's waiting for more.
Yeah.
And you know what kills me is like,
From the third person too many times. And I was just like, I'm not playing.
oh no,
Not
third
doing it.
person in a witchcraft book is always like, nope. Like, what are you talking about? This
Yeah.
is weird. No, I feel like that type of like lingo or jargon lingo, I feel like that gets onto online spaces too, and people start using like these words like colloquial language, and I feel like it's so alienating for people where it's like people are not gonna know what the fuck you're talking about, Jane, or whatever you name it. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about?
I am a big fan of Roger Horn. Like,
Yeah.
it just, also I like the way at the beginning of everything, the exercises are great, but at the beginning of everything, he just begins to tell you a story about a practitioner. Like,
Mhm.
practitioner is like, it's calm outside. They feel that now is the time.
Yes.
This,
Yes.
and they take you through this journey of what
Yes.
the individual is doing,
Mhm.
why they're doing it, and
Mhm.
it just helps it all tie it in. Because
Right.
I think other times people don't know where to begin when they're writing a book about it, and like, so
Right.
what you do is this, this, and this, and it's like you can't just say that.
No, it's one isn't that funny because witchcraft is so much about how you feel too, and it's very difficult, I think, to convey in text. But Roger Horn, it really does do just a great job at kind of putting yourself in the shoes of somebody. And I find that when I read those passages, I'm like, there's a sense of like identification that you can make. I'm like, oh yeah, I felt like that before too, and it's very validating because I think sometimes on the path, and I've been doing this for a while, but there's still so many moments where I'm like, oh my God, do I know what I'm doing? You know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
that's a normal human function to get like really insecure
Right.
sometimes where you're like, oh shit, you know, or you just want that sense of validation that other people are experiencing the same thing that you are. And
Yeah.
it's so cathartic when you get to talk to other people or read text like that and you're like, oh, thank God. Okay, other people are experiencing this too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
what, like, that's always super reassuring. Trapped.
Oh my god.
I have a book. I haven't actually read this book yet. I got it when we were in England. I believe it's from a German practitioner.
Oh, really?
It's from a German practitioner from a long time ago who moved to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
The long hidden friend.
Yeah,
right?
that's like a staple in our community.
Yeah, I have it there, and I've
Yeah.
looked for it, but I haven't actually got around to reading.
Okay, so I can give you the deets on that book.
Right.
Okay, so that is an interesting thing. So that guy, he practices a tradition called Braucherei. So it's Braucherei, because I know German words are fucking impossible to understand how they're spelled. So that is a Pennsylvania German specific tradition, at least in that namesake. And so it stems from like a continental tradition. And in continental Germany, you'll hear it called as Brauche, which is Brauche. But that guy who wrote that, Hoffman, he allegedly, we suspect, actually got a lot of the spells from his wife. So there's an interesting dynamic with like the Pennsylvania German practitioners. It's a very Christian practice. And so, oh my God, if you asked one of them, they would be completely offended at the even slight notion that some of the spells have a more non-Christian origin or from some non-Christian history. Because Braucherei is so Christian, at least many think it is. And so the way that the tradition works is like it's very well, and this is kind of like a German folk magic thing too, is like you're not really supposed to talk about stuff. It's some people don't think you should even write spells down. When you recite a spell, you're supposed to do it sort of like in a low voice, almost like whispering, or even just like barely audible at all. And so the author of that book allegedly, heard some stuff from his wife, or he was like taking notes and then like published it, which is a huge taboo because again, you're not supposed to write stuff. And so a lot of the men in those communities, beyond him, like before him, they had gotten in trouble for the same stuff. And I was reading this book of something that happened in East Germany and Saxony of the same kind of thing. I can't remember his name, but it's like the grimoire is widely used still. It's not that the grimoire is like total shit or anything, but it's interesting just to like know that history, that some of it is actually from his wife and some of it could potentially be like missing some details. But overall it's not bad. Like it's not like you bought a bad book or anything, but it is a fascinating like background to know that this is like a historical trend of like men kind of like writing down what their wives were doing and then publishing something in a very
I would never
way that was counter to the taboos.
It was a strange thing. It was whenever we go back to go to England, I order from Troy Books, and it was there, and it was like, I want to get that. It was just, I was like, I want to get that. That sounds interesting, because I've heard people mention the long so many times. I was like, I need to have a look.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that I forget that, with kids, reading a book is not a simple thing anymore.
No.
Literally half a page, and it's like, Dad, I'll come back to it in a few hours.
And that book is so interesting too, because it's just like, if your cow has gangrene, what do you do? And it's like, I don't fucking care. And so he has a lot of spells that are like that. But again, that's folk magic. That's like the nature of the beast. And so it's kind of like you gotta strip the concept and apply it somewhere else sometimes. But yeah, that's one of like the more prominent grimoires. There's a lot of grimoires that in German folk magic a lot of people don't really know about. You kind of have to dig. But that's definitely one of the bigger ones.
Nice.
Right.
I would say it's actually the most popular one.
Okay.
So
cool.
That's really cool.
What do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about Norse pagans and how much I hate them.
all right.
Nice.
You want to ask that one?
No. So like, yeah. Whoever you guys want to, if you want to ask, do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, you asked the
Ask the
question.
question. Okay.
Okay.
You see that one?
I honestly just liked on Norse pagans and how much I hate them. I was like that.
We could just go
with
from
that.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We can just go from that. Yeah.
Let's just do that.
Yeah. Okay. So I hate them. And that's it. The end. So there's like this big thing. I think that like if I could just like, I don't know, like get a megaphone and walk on the streets like I was in the Westboro Baptist Church, but like saying something useful, I would be telling people, that fucking like Germanic and German, first of all, they're not the same thing. And so I think that it's a super easy mistake to make because German is a Germanic language. Germans are a Germanic people, but they're different because technically people from the Netherlands, people from Sweden, people from Finland, even people from fucking England are technically Germanic because like the word Germanic is sort of like a more encompassing like etymological term. And so when people refer to Germanic, it technically refers to people who spoke those Germanic languages, which again includes people like even, oh my God, I can't remember what language, but there's like a Scots language that is Germanic, which always blows my mind when I remember that. But that's because the Anglo-Saxons came over to England and they occupied that area. And they brought over potentially like, like the Queen of Elfhame, she's very big in Low Scotland, and the Low Scottish people were actually that's part of the area that the Anglo-Saxons came and converted. And the Anglo-Saxons likely brought over, certain aspects of their own theology, which includes the goddess that I particularly venerate, whose name is multiple names, but most commonly known as Holda or Frau. And so she is basically the German Queen of Elfhame, if you want to say it that way in very simplistic terms. That But anyways, and I think that people just forget that like German and Germanic are different, and so like German as a country, hasn't existed. Its borders weren't finalized until 1945. So it's like we have to be careful about the language because that's one of the things that the Nazis wanted to do, is they wanted to pose that the Germans were this like perfect, Aryan people, and that they were the true Germanics, the true whatevers. And so it's like I don't like the equating of the terms for that particular reason. And I think a lot of people, when they get into their family history, they think, oh, well, my family was from Germany, so they must have been Germanic pagans, which means they were Norse pagans. It's like, well, Norse pagan is just an iteration of that. It's not the, it's not the exclusivity. It's not the, summary of everything that was going on. And so it's like where you have this goddess Frigg in, very, very far north Germany and Denmark and whatnot, was actually, more similar to a goddess named Holda. And actually Holda is sort of like, depending on the text that you read, is often likened to the goddess Hel, who is like the underworld goddess, as well as Frigg. And so kind of like these two different goddesses sort of like stem from her potentially. I don't know. But yeah, Norse pagans, it's just like, it's not the end of it, right? And I think that a lot of people think that Norse paganism is like the end all be all to anything that's Germanic, and that's just not true. And I think a lot of people also forget that the role that the Nazis played in perpetuating this logic, because a lot of people don't realize that the Nazis had a occultist group, like one of the architects of the Holocaust, Heinrich Himmler. He was an occultist, and he leaned heavily into German occultism, which was a byproduct of Romanticism in the 1800s. And with Romanticism came nationalism. There came a rise in occultism and spiritualism, and it was dated in an era of wide popular anti-Semitism. And you combine all these cultural factors, and you have German occultism that the Nazis embraced and they used for their propaganda. And they, wanted to venerate, they wanted to bring back Yule, and they wanted to bring back, the idea of Ostara and all these other concepts. And they helped perpetuate a lot of these false notions that we have today, and like, completely overblowing a lot of the sacred practice of like the runes, and then completely misconstruing them into, something that we know now today as like the Armanen runes, which are like a modern pseudoscientific bullshit narrative of runes. And they're, the claim is that, oh, they're very historical, when in reality they were made by a German esoterist named Guido von List. Well, he was Austrian, in the 1800s. They're not historical. It's bullshit. And so it's just one of those things that if I could leave anybody with any information, it's to note that we have to dig into the history in this particular path. German folk magic has a long, beautiful history far beyond the Nazis, far beyond romanticism and whatnot. And it has those roots in animism and these old practices, but it also has a lot of bullshit and a lot of evil that stained it. And I think that if people are trying to get into anything related to that in this particular folk practice, it's about being honest about history,
Yeah.
being honest about how fucking rampant anti-Semitism still is today in most occult practices, and understanding, that we have to also take an honest look at ourselves and realize that, witchcraft, paganism, it's beautiful, but it's not an escapist route, right?
Right.
Like it's not, there's still evil that exists in these communities. And so that's the one thing that if I could gain anything from my presence online, it would be reminding people of all that. So
Yeah. I think that's great advice for especially new people coming into the community, is like just research the shit out of everything.
yes.
Like you said in the beginning too, people
Yeah.
get so hung up on this, like, it's like when you take a Facebook quiz or whatever, like,
Oh my God.
which am I?
Oh yeah. What deity is reaching out to me? Oh,
Yeah.
fucking none. None of them. Not a single one.
Mhm.
They're just there and you're just noticing them. Who are you noticing?
Right. Exactly.
I never understand. I never understand that. I will never understand why people.
No.
That it's just the human concept that
It is 100%. It's
Everything is
I
about
get it. I
them.
think that it's a understandable human notion, but I think that it's funny when you sit and you break it down. You're like, okay, so a God that's existed since the beginning of time is they've sent me a memo. No, they didn't. They don't need you, and you need them in a way.
Billions of people. They looked at one and was like, I need to
Yeah.
talk to you about
You
something.
know what
You're the one.
And it's always the same ones. Isn't that interesting? It's always the
Mhm.
same 5 or 10 ones that are always reaching out to people. That's fascinating to me. But
Yeah.
all these other gods, they're just like kicking back. They're like, fuck it. They got it covered. Like, what do people think is like? I don't understand that conceptualization at all. But
I have to say this. I have to say this because this drove me mad, and no one ever seems to say it on TikTok. The amount of people that all of a sudden started working, I quote, working with Loki.
Right. Oh yeah.
After the Marvel show Loki
It's
aired.
undeniable.
Undeniable. Like all of a sudden, Loki's really hot and charming and witty, and all of a sudden, like,
no,
Loki got in touch with me because a fly landed on my hand.
No, my biggest flex is that there's no record of Loki existing in Germany. That's my biggest flex. I'm like, not in my house. But I mean, really, when you actually get into like the study of Loki and the role that he plays in like this antagonistic sense of like, even including in like how they perceive like the changing of seasons and his role in that, like there's like a fascinating aspect of it. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I just also I can't mentally deal with this because it's just so grating. Every other fucking video is about Loki sending me spiders. I'm like, is your house clean?
Yeah.
Clean your house.
Like, it's a spider. It's not a big. It's like if a deer leapt through your window, started bucking and thrashing around, like jabbed you with its antler, and you're laying there bleeding.
Oh yeah.
And then blood formed a rune on the floor. You may then be
right.
Fine.
Right.
Yeah.
And it goes back to something, this remarkable human desire to want to identify and like have all these ways that you can describe yourself. And I think it's totally understandable and normal for a human to want to do that. But we've definitely taken it to an extent where it's just like, wow, you're bringing the sacred and profane into this desire for self-identification and validation. And it's just like, you don't necessarily need to do that. You probably should find that validation in yourself. And then also, you're valid as you are now. You're part of humanity. You're part of the earth. You contribute every single day to the society and the communities around you. That's fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
And you don't need a goddamn god to validate that within you. If you feel identified with one, then fucking lean into that. That's cool, fine. But don't make things out into these broad, amazing gestures when it's just like, I feel like that just puts so much pressure on the whole thing. It puts pressure on you. It puts pressure on the situation. Just relax, Everybody needs to just calm down. I don't know.
It's a slippery slope, guys.
Honestly, people do seem so worried sometimes about like, I feel like something's reaching out, but I don't know. And it's like, you're creating so much
Oh yeah.
anxiety from this.
Yes.
You know, that you're never going to even get a message, even if there was a
Right.
message there.
Right. Well, and I think it's such an easy like kind of thing to get, fall into, because as you scroll, it's like you start to be like, oh my God, am I missing something? Am I the only one that's out of the zeitgeist, And that's disconcerting a little bit sometimes, where you're like, am I the problem? Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
What's going on? But then it's just like that's my biggest complaint from Witch Talk, I think, is just sometimes that you really have to take a step back and do a reality check and be like, okay, this is only describing a cultural phenomenon that's existing in this circle, whether people want to say that or not. If you can't find this phenomenon elsewhere, then it's likely a phenomenon exclusive to this particular niche and community.
Yeah.
And that absolutely is one that's on Witch Talk, where it's this desire to be like, I don't know. And then like, and and then like leave offerings out for fucking months. And it's like, oh my God, look at this petrified apple on my altar. I'm like, ew,
Yeah.
throw it away.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's good. Like, it just all these just bizarre notions, I think, that people have. And again, I think it's coming from perfectly valid, perfectly understandable, human experiences, but it does get crazy out of hand sometimes.
It does. Some of the things like you said, people will leave out like libations on their offering. Like, you never guess. Tomorrow, most of it was yesterday. I looked, and now today, most of it's gone. It's like, yeah, it's evaporation. What did you expect?
What? Okay. Or it's like, sometimes it's like, I had a moment where I try to pour a water libation, like, I'm not gonna say how often I do it and then how often I should do it, but like, or at least how often I feel like I should do it, as a devotional act, whatever. And it's funny because like I poured it and I was like, oh wow, this hasn't evaporated as much. It's like, oh, this is different. And then I was like, it's winter, so there's not as much heat to evaporate the water.
Right.
Science. Like, oh yeah, right. Okay,
Yeah.
reality check. But yeah, so it's like it's always important to compare against like the seasonal differences. Like, okay, what was this typically like in the winter or whatever, just mundane, the mundane.
We check each other all the time, which is kind
Oh
of,
yeah.
and you'll be like, I think you're looking into this a little too hard.
Oh my God. And that's the funny thing that I think is so I think that's why community is so fucking important. I think because you really need somebody to check you before you get unhinged. And I think that's the conversation a lot of people aren't prepared to talk about, I think.
Yeah.
Especially in the online communities, it's just how unchecked and how easy it is to spiral to the point where it's like, I'll see some just the most heinous shit I've seen all day in my fucking life on Witch Talk. And I'm like, and then you open the comments, everybody's like, oh, that's so cool for you. I'm like, what the fuck? You have got, are you kidding me right now, dude? Like, Apollo said that I can vet any spirit that comes to me. What are you even talking about? What do you what?
Spiritual psychosis.
That makes no fucking sense. Why? And then to vet, or like, like, oh, I'll offer a deity confirmation for you. And it's like, well, do you work with them? Do you know them? Can you recognize them when you, oh no. I'm like,
Then
what are you doing? That's weird. A little bizarre to me. I mean, whatever. Like, I think that you can like recognize like certain energetic patterns, but like to be like, this is definitively Loki reaching out to you. Like,
that's
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. I think it's all very intense. And then I don't know. Kind of reminds me of that high magic thing too, where everybody's just trying to seem super powerful and I'm super cool. I'm in the cool club, whatever.
I think it's important. And I think Frankie said this recently, Chaotic Witch Aunt. And I think what they said was something along the lines of like, I prefer people to say, in my opinion, about everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you fall down this, like we talked about, slippery slope of definitive, this is definitely Apollo. You can be like, I think, in my opinion, it feels like Apollo, or I think this is the traits of Loki.
No, like, definitely.
Yeah, we have such a need for certainty in humanity, and it's like some things just aren't fucking certain, and you as a human, you're fallible, Like I don't care how fucking good of a witch you are. You're a fallible human being and you have your own
Mhm.
biases that run unchecked. It's just human nature. That's totally natural.
Absolutely.
And it's not even fucking about knowing about Frigg or about hell. It's about knowing history sometimes too. And it's an amazing thing that people, I don't think, seem to remember. It's like, do you know how many deities have been lost by their names over time, that sometimes you won't know their name? And sometimes it's also not a deity. Sometimes it could very much be a particular land spirit or whatever, or a fucking ancestor. It's your grandma. You know what I mean? Who knows? Like, holy shit, you've got family.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, you just never know. It's definitely, I love Frankie's such a swell person. I really do like, I mean, saying in my opinion or in my experience, I think that that's such a good rule.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, we've come to the end.
We come to the end.
Well,
Is there anything you want to promote?
go vote if your state's in a runoff. I don't know. I don't know. I'm shit at this shit.
You have a Patreon? You have
I do. Yeah. Okay. If you want to learn about German folk magic, I like to think I know a little bit. And I have a Patreon. You can learn a little bit on that Patreon. I have a YouTube because I have a incessant need for providing information to people. Because we live in an age of information, and yet we live in an age of misinformation as well. So I have a YouTube with some more long form content than my typical shit on TikTok. So if you want to follow me there. But yeah, generally on most platforms, I am a AHearthWitch. I think I'm a Hold a Witch on Instagram. Don't follow me there. I don't post anything. That's useless. If you want to see my hot takes, I'm on Twitter. I don't fucking know my username actually. I think it's a Hold a Witch. I don't know. If you want to see my obscene opinions about the world, you can follow me on Twitter, I guess. But mostly I'm on Patreon and I'm on YouTube, and those are the platforms that are more educational. So yeah.
You can find us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook as The Antlered Crown, or on YouTube as Elwyn the Witch.
I offer a variety of readings, including bone, tarot, medium, connection, as well as spiritual consultations, which are done live and scheduled via Zoom. I am also offering spell work and custom merchandise, all of which you can find on my website, theantleredcrown.com.
You can also join our community on Patreon and get access to our Discord server, group meetings, one-on-ones with Elwyn, tutorials, discounts, and other goodies depending on the tier level you choose.
Speaking of which, here is our Antlered Crown patron shout-out for the month.
Leslie and Willie!
There you go. Next time we'll be talking more about hex magic. Yes, often sex ends in a fart.
It does.
No, it doesn't.
And always remember,
To be a witch, bitch.
bye!
Bye.